Quite often, the default tags offered by K6 are simply not enough to categorize the different K6 entities involved in a test. Let me show you this scenario step by step, and you'll find this file as it is right now as a resource to this lecture. So here on the top we have the imports, that's quite easy. Then in the options we have defined some thresholds. We can see here from the beginning that we have a custom metric, so this essentially counts HTTP errors, and every time an error occurs, HTTP errors gets incremented. Relatively simple. We have here one request and the other request. Each of the requests has a check, so that's relatively easy to see as well. So in a nutshell, this is how this particular test looks like. Nothing we have not seen before. We're taking a look at the results. You're going to see here that the checks are passing, but if we're taking a look at the HTTP request duration, again, we're going to see here very, very long duration. This has been simulated here with a Mocky endpoint by simply specifying here a 2-second delay, and this makes this particular threshold be reached, and then K6 is raising the alarm. Now with K6, we can also define our own tags. For example, let's just imagine that this is the endpoint that is submitting an order, and there are different things that are related to this order. So let's say everything, we want to essentially tag everything that's related to the order or to the order page or something like that. And the thing is, K6 allows us, among other things, to tag requests, checks, and even custom metrics. So let me show you how we can tag all the things that are related to submitting an order and how we can view that then in the report itself, but also set here the thresholds in the configuration. Now let's begin with the request itself. So we're going to leave the first request as it is. This has nothing to do with, let's say, submitting an order. We just want to tag the second request. So the way that we're going to do this is, again, relatively simple. And we're going to take a look here at how a GET request, for example, looks like. I'm going to see here the second argument to this is this params. So it's not directly something where you can specify tags. We need to put this here inside params. So I'm just going to move this on a separate line just to have a bit more space so that you can understand the structure. So this is the first argument that we're pushing to HTTP GET. And then as a second thing, we can provide here some params, some additional data essentially. So I'm going to create here an object. So you'll see here these braces. This indicates now we have an object. Now inside this object, what we're going to do here is going to define a property called tags. This needs to be written exactly as it is. You'll see here, this is an optional property. It's indicated by this question mark here as I start typing. And this itself is an object. Just by doing this, we haven't done anything. Now, inside the tags property and within this object, what we're going to do here is we're going to define the tags. Now, we can define one tag or, of course, multiple tags if we wish. But in this case, I'm just going to define a tag called page. And I'm going to give it the value order. So the name of the tag will be page, column, and then as a string, I'm going to write order. So this is how we are essentially tagging this request and saying, okay, the page for this request is order. Just as well, we could have tagged the other request as well and said it's the home page or something totally different. Doesn't really matter for this particular example. Okay, perfect. So in order to actually take advantage of this tag, we're going to go back to the thresholds. And here we're going to use HTTP request duration because we want to say, for example, we want to dig into this and we want to see by tag. For example, we want the checkout page to be at a specific threshold. Maybe we don't even want to use this HTTP request duration for all requests. So in order to go to that specific tag, we're going to again use HTTP request duration. And then using the syntax for filtering, we're going to filter by this particular tag. So what we're going to use in this situation is going to simply write page, column, and the page will be order. So this is what we have. Okay, this entire thing needs to be between quotes. So I'm going to go ahead and put a single quote in the beginning and the quote at the end. Column, and then we specify our condition, whatever. For example, here the 95th percentile needs to be, we expect this page to be super fast for some reason. So we're going to provide here a different value. Right, so let's go ahead and understand how this works. We're going to run this once again. So if we're taking a look here at the report, what we're going to see here under HTTP request duration, we're going to see here this filter on the tag. So we have the page, order, and super important, we are seeing here non-zero values. That's always important to check that there are non-zero values here because we don't expect anything to be zero here. So this will indicate us that this page is actually the one that's probably causing us the problems. And of course, we can also go ahead and simply remove this, let's say, global request duration, which may not be so useful. So we can define, we can tag different things and only look at specific things with these tags that we have. Right, so this is how we can tag a request. As you've probably seen, we also have here these checks, right? So we have a check here and we also have a check here. Now, checks as well can be tagged. So let me show you how we can tag something like this. So for checks, this is relatively easy. If we're looking here at the syntax for a check, so if we're hovering over this, you're going to see here that one of the parameters, actually the third argument that we're sending, is directly the tags object. So how do we identify this? Well, this is the first thing that we're sending. Then we have here an object, this is the second one. And then we need to submit another object. So I'm going to go ahead and make this braces here. So what we're going to write here, we can directly write the tags that we want. So again, I'm going to write here page, and I'm going to tag the page with order. So now this check is also associated with a tag. If you don't like how this is written, you can of course move it on a separate line. So there's multiple ways on how you can organize this. So for example, this can be on a separate line as well. You can also put this here on a separate line. So there's, let's say there's flexibility on how you're writing this. Just as well, you can go ahead and put everything on a single line. If you don't like the fact that this is taking so much space, that's also fine to format it in a different way and then have everything on a single line. I'm just showing you like the different ways on how you can organize this. It's super important to understand like 1, 2, and 3. This is the third argument, and to understand the syntax that's involved here, because you can easily, brackets and braces and I don't know what commas. It's very easy to make a mistake and not to understand exactly like what's the structure here. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and see how we can access this check as well. And the principle is very, very similar to what we have here. So in order to use a check, if we don't already have one, that's super easy. We can go ahead and write here checks. And we can set something for the check. So for example, we can have globally, we can say, I don't know, gonna get a rate, and the rate needs to be greater or equal than 0.99. Which means 99% of the checks need to pass. Perfect. So this is something that we can set on a global level, but just as well, we can use the tag. So again, I'm gonna duplicate the line, and here I'm gonna use the filter. I'm gonna write here page, and the page will be order. Again, to make this valid JavaScript, I'm gonna put this inside quotes. So now we're gonna have checks which go over all the checks, regardless if they're tagged or not. And these checks which only look for checks that are tagged with page order. Perfect. So if we're taking a look here at the checks, you will see here the checks are showing up. And it's also, again, super important here to check that we don't have zero value. So there was at least one check. We'll be able to see it here. It's 100%, so everything looks good. It means that the way we have set this filter and the way we have referenced this filter inside the thresholds is correct. Now, last but not least, we also have here a custom metric. And even for metrics, we can define tags. So that's relatively easy. So let's say, again, we're going to define this only here where we have submitted an order. We're going to say here this. If there's an error that appears, we want to tag it here and want to know that it's related to the order page. So if we're taking a look here at the end, we're going to see here that the second argument that providing here is directly the tags object. So we can be a bit lazy and simply copy this from here. So what we already have from the check, I'm gonna put it here. So again, an object with a property page, order. Of course, we can set multiple tags as needed. And just as well, we have here the HTTP errors custom metric, and we can filter within it. So let's go ahead and copy the exact same filter that we have. And I'm going to put it within quotes. Perfect. So we should see this also in the report that is being generated now. What we're going to see here right on top, HTTP errors. I'm going to see here HTTP errors 0 and also filtered for the order page also 0. Now we want to make sure that we have the syntax and everything correctly. So we're going to do a small test here. So I'm just going to simulate here an error. I'm going to negate this entire expression here. So I'm going to put this exclamation mark here in the beginning. So this will essentially negate the if. So it will essentially add an error when there is not an error. So this is just a way to simulate an event being added there. So we should see our metric actually failing. So let's take a look at it. So we have here HTTP errors 1, and this is more specific. If we're taking a look at this tag, we're going to see here also 1, which means that this is working properly. So this is how you can tag different entities in K6, and then you can use those tags later on in thresholds and also looking at the reports to understand what is happening with your request.